you're going into the medical field, you know what you're getting yourself into. You're going to be exposed to diseases that you didn't know. Someone's always sick, obviously, because you are working in a hospital setting. But to the people who are not, that's not what you signed up for. And with this COVID thing going around, you're pretty much right there on the front lines with us.
This is Heroes for Zero, a Contec podcast. In this episode, we're talking quarantine stories, how healthcare professionals and those that support them are navigating today's new world. First up, we'll hear from Jessica, who works at a hospital in New York City. What do you do in the hospital setting?
I am an X-ray tech.
In a world that doesn't have COVID, what's a normal day like for an X-ray tech?
So normally we do a lot of actually different things that people don't assume we do. My job is not just doing X-rays. We go into surgery suites. We do portable X-rays, which are the ones that go to the room to see you. You don't come down to a department, or you don't come down to where we're centrally located. We do moving X-rays. So we do a big study where you swallow. So we're physically X-raying you while you're swallowing a radiolucent drink, which tastes like chalk.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't actually know what we do.
Wow.
You just assume all we do is X-rays, broken bones. No, there's actually a lot of things, and there's a lot of parts to what we actually do in our job every day.
And so now talking about, today, right now, all around the world, we're dealing with COVID-19. What's your day look like, today, for instance?
So today, for instance, I was working in the emergency department. So we're not getting as many, possible broken bones, gunshot wounds. We're not doing that anymore. And most patients that we're getting are cough, respiratory, and any patient that comes in pretty much with a fever and a cough, we're treating them as possible COVID. So aside from normal X-rays, which we're not actually getting as many I don't want to say regular patients because it's an emergency room, but normal to stuff that we would usually get, we're getting a lot of chest X-rays. So that we can't bring them into our unit, into our area, because if they are positive without us knowing, we're exposing an entire room of other people to it because then everybody would have to dress out with their precaution outfits, with the gowns, gloves, masks. And because our rooms are not set up to be negative pressure. So we have to go into the room specifically to every single patient that comes in through the ER with any kind of respiratory issue.
What's the process like going into work now? How do you protect yourself and then protect your coworkers?
So me personally, I work in a hospital. We wear scrubs. I do not wear my personal scrubs to work anymore. I wear a sweater, sweatpants. As soon as I walk into work, there are nurses waiting for us to take our temperature and hand us masks. And they all ask you, have you had any cough, fever, chills, any kind of those things? You say no, they take your temperature, they give you a mask, you're on your way. I walk straight into personal locker rooms, and I wear scrubs provided by the hospital. So the scrubs that I wear to when I'm in contact with my patients are scrubs that stay at the hospital. That does not come home with me. The shoes that I wear around work do not come home with me. I leave a secondary pair of sneakers there that do not come back with me at all. So nothing comes back with me. And I haven't gone anywhere recently. I've gone from work to home, and if I have to go to the grocery store, I try not to spend more than 30 minutes there.
This podcast, like I said earlier, is called Heroes for Zero, and our goal is zero contaminations and infections in healthcare settings. Normally, we would only profile healthcare workers who are responsible for maintaining that zero. But however, COVID-19 has led to many normal people being called upon to be heroes, whether that's getting tested, collecting or donated supplies, or just simply staying home. So, as a healthcare worker, what is your message to the average everyday non-healthcare person who right now is part of the fight against COVID-19?
I mean, we get into this as healthcare workers knowing what we're doing. Obviously, you're going into the medical field, you know what you're getting yourself into. You're going to be exposed to diseases that you didn't know. Someone's always sick, obviously, because you are working in a hospital setting. But to the people who are not, that's not what you signed up for. And with this COVID thing going around, you're pretty much right there on the front lines with us. It's not what you signed up for, but right now you're just as essential as we are. You're no better, no less than what we do. You might not be in physical contact taking care of a patient, but what you're doing is helping us take care of patients.
Are you worried at all? Like, does any of this worry you?
So around the beginning, I feel like I was like everyone else. Like, oh, it's just kind of like the flu. Just be careful. Kind of wash your hands, and I don't want to say I'm not scared because I do see what's going on. I am a little more worried than I was before, but kind of like I said before, this is kind of what I signed up for. Of course, I did not sign up. I did not know that this was going to happen. Nobody knows that a pandemic worldwide is going on. But at the same time, it is kind of what I signed up for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm worried. Of course, I don't want to get sick, and I'm going to do what I can personally to not expose anybody else because I do come in and out of a hospital 5 days a week. I stay in my apartment by myself. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about being with other people and telling them to like, hey, go away because of this. Yeah, there's always a worry in the back of my mind, but it does make me feel a little bit better that I personally am not exposing someone else. Like if I get sick, I would be the only person to get sick.
Right. Well, very cool.
So that helps me a little bit more thinking about it. But yeah, of course I'm worried. I don't want to get sick.
Yeah.
But my worry is to get anyone else sick. Again, for the people who didn't really sign up for this, it is really scary to think about. Like, oh man, like I'm going to get sick and I had no intentions on ever being around a sick person like this. But you got to do what you got to do.
Thanks, Jessica, for joining us. Coming up, we'll hear from Michael Myers.
So that weekend when I did not get my test results and I was a little freaked out, I decided to log into that website. And a form pulls up and it says Michael Myers, and then it says the letter POS, COVID.
But first, our next guests are Mara and Dave, a couple that both work in healthcare settings. Mara, could you tell us what you do?
I'm an emergency room nurse, and I work the night shift.
And Dave?
So I am a post-surgical nurse that takes care of patients that have had open heart surgery and cardiac services, and also for many years that we've been running ventilators.
Okay. So for you, Mara, on a normal day before COVID, what was your day like?
Well, our emergency department is probably one of the busiest in Southern California. We see about 325, 350 on average a day, which is extremely busy. I would go into my shift at night. I would have either a 3 or 4 bed assignment, or at times on the like a modified charge relief. So I would be watching over the other nurses, making sure the flow of my section was run properly. Or I could be up in the triage bay area. In the emergency department, there's several different roles that you can do once you've been there a while, and I've been there about 5 years. On any typical night, I could have 1 or 2 CPRs, but I would say on average in a week, I would see at least 1 CPR a week, or critical patient level wise, I would have maybe, I would send at least 5 patients to the ICU on a given week. I worked 3 12-hour shifts. So that was a typical day/week for me.
And so depending on at what point you're listening to this podcast, it's now May. And so we're a couple of months into COVID here in the U.S. So, Mara, what's a day look like now with COVID?
Surprisingly, our census has dropped quite a bit. So like I said previously, a 350 person day, now we're seeing about half that. So maybe 150 people, which is such a change up. Usually our department has long waits. Now there's no waits. We set up an emergency tent to screen COVID patients. So some patients don't even make it back into the main hospital. They're just screened and treated and tested in this tent area. So on a night where I would see, 3-4 patients, or I'd be assigned to 3 or 4 patients, I'm finding I'm only in a 2-bed assignment. There's lulls in the night where I don't have any patients at all because people who would normally come in are afraid to. Or we have designated a COVID section of our department. So if I'm assigned to the COVID section, that's an entirely different story. That's extremely busy. It's reached our nursing home population here in San Diego, and I would say that is an intense area to work in. Constantly seeing patients, a lot of donning and doffing of clothing, protective gear. We're lucky enough that we have some HCPs, which are healthcare providers, and we designated one of them to be our donor and doffer. So they help us put on all of our protective equipment. And then after we come out of the room treating the patient, they help us take off all that equipment so that we don't contaminate ourselves or contaminate others. Those patients, some of them are extremely sick. I would say the rate of CPRs in those instances is maybe less, but quite a few more intubations, where I was maybe doing, like I said, a CPR or a critical care patient a few times a week. I would say that's probably doubled since COVID for the intubation portion, maybe not necessarily the CPR portion. So definitely a lot of respiratory distresses. Caring for these patients when they first come in is really a lengthy process. It could be in a room for over an hour, hour and a half, just trying to get them stabilized. And when you're in all that protective gear, it gets real warm real quick. So I would say you come out of that room, you're pretty sweaty, only to have to then go in another room and do the same thing all over again.
Wow, yeah.
That's if you're in the COVID section. If you're not in the COVID section, you get your normal chest pain, possible stroke patients, all the normal things you would see in an emergency room. But I would say our overall census is lower than it was before, surprisingly.
And Dave, you actually work on a COVID floor. Can you describe a little bit about that, kind of what a day is like for you right now?
Of course. So for 12 years, I took care of patients post-surgery and stable ventilators. And then as of mid-February, the unit that we manage has turned completely to COVID and COVID rule-out. So we've removed all surgical patients. Any patients that are not related to COVID have been sent to other units to be managed at this time, for which we try to help staff also those units. And then, so our units, because of the way it's set up, we do have 9 negative pressure rooms, and then we have the ability to control airflow through the unit. So we have gone to complete COVID management. So we have 34 beds on this particular unit, and on a typical day, we have 20 to 34 patients that we're treating. And that entails that myself and my staff, we have become in the morning, we're issued surgical scrubs provided by the hospital that are cleaned daily. And then we put on the surgical scrubs, then we manage our personal protective equipment per room, which could include anywhere from a regular simple mask or surgical mask to N95. And then in some cases, with some patients, we're donning what we call PAPRs, but that is a negative pressure hood with protective equipment. So that's the entire day, managing the patients through their symptoms. And the how the day can work, it can be is if the patient is looking poorly, we move very quickly to intubation, much like Mara had mentioned. The intubations are higher now on the unit, of course.
Wow, so it sounds like the typical routine that you have in the hospital setting has certainly changed. How about when you step away from the hospital and come back home? What have you two had to do to keep yourself safe and each other safe?
So I'll answer this first. So in February, in the beginning of February, when it started, well, when we saw that there was possible community spread here and in China, we figured that we have to have a plan in place to protect our families. So Mara and I have 2 small children, so I was following it pretty closely to determine when we would be pulling them out of school, and then what we would do as far as our own safety for the house here. So we set up in, much like we do at work now, we actually set up in our garage an area where we derobe what we were wearing for the day. And we then have towels waiting for us there. And many years ago, I built an outside shower because we're here in Southern California and we like to go to the beach a lot. And I got tired of the sand coming into the house. So we actually shower in this outside shower. And then after that, then we come in the house. So we don't touch anything in the house until we've already disrobed everything from work and we've showered in the outside shower. And of course, much like everybody else does, we've been cleaning all our surfaces on a regular basis. And so this is bleach and water style.
I keep a thing of Clorox wipes in my car. So I also get issued OR scrubs at work. When I have to change at work back into my regular clothes, and then when I get in my car, I wipe everything down with some wipes, my badge, my cell phone, anything that I think I might have touched while I was at work. Then when I get home, like Dave said, he set up a station with a table, and I take off, maybe my watch, my clothes go in a separate laundry basket. We do separate laundry for those clothes. I wear like a headdress to protect my hair when I'm at work. That gets washed, and just like Dave said, I take it outside shower as well. And we routinely wipe down with like a bleach and water mixture. And we just do high touch surface areas, mostly like doorknobs, switch lights, and, all the bathrooms. Yeah, I have several coworkers. Some of them got hotel rooms and are staying in hotel rooms while they take care of COVID patients. David as well has coworkers doing that. I have friends that sent their children to like grandparents and aunts and uncles, and we discussed all that, and, we made a decision, or at least I made a decision, that I wasn't going to live in fear of this virus. I wasn't going to let it consume my entire being, that I couldn't be around my children and still enjoy my life, even though I am fearful of, what could potentially happen. I try to be as cautious as I can and, just go about my daily life and try to protect myself and my children. But for us, that wasn't something we wanted to do. But I understand people that do go that route. It just wasn't something I could see myself doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So both of us have been through quite a bit of infectious disease in the past. We dealt with the bird flu, so we had H1N1. And that was actually the playbook that we brought out in the hospital. We had long talks in January about what we were going to do if this came to our community. So we kind of opened up that playbook and we revised it a little bit to get ready for this.
Well, that's really, really interesting. And I just want to say I greatly appreciate the work both of you are doing and using your knowledge and abilities to take care of others. Matt Shearing, our Chief Marketing Officer at Contec, also wanted to say something to you both.
What I really just wanted to do was take a moment and express my appreciation to the Morse and your entire family. We talk a lot, or we see a lot in the news lately about frontline heroes and the impact that they're having. And I think it's really admirable that the two of you, in your own way, through our healthcare system, are doing your part and then some in this fight against COVID. And whether it's healthcare workers or folks at retail or people that are delivering food these days, so many people have stepped up in so many wonderful ways. And it's really our honor to speak to you both. And I just want to say on behalf of Contec how much we appreciate the effort that you're putting forth.
Oh, Matt, thanks.
That's very nice. Thank you very
That's
much.
really kind of you. Thank you, Matt.
Michael Myers is a clinical support manager with Contec, based in Las Vegas. Michael was also recently tested for COVID-19 and will share some of that story. First, Michael, what exactly do you do with Contec?
Sure, Daniel. I work with Contec's healthcare division, primarily with our folks that help and support sterile compounding pharmacists. I work to help train all of our people. We also work with some amazing specialty dealers that help get the product to the hospitals. So I work to help train those folks. And then I do training at the hospitals on best practices for cleaning and disinfecting clean rooms and primary engineering controls. And we do a lot of web learning stuff as well.
And so, Michael, when we were talking before, you told me that you recently got tested for COVID-19. Can you tell me a little bit about that timeline and what that process was like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm very lucky. I didn't have major, I guess you say, symptoms. I was running a sort of a slight fever. So we had all, the folks at Contec had gotten together in North Carolina for, what we actually called a global sales meeting. And I think that word global sales meeting is what triggered my doctor into saying, yeah, you should go get tested. But on that weekend around the 14th, I was starting to feel the fever and was sort of run down. So that Monday, I got a hold of my doctor. And at that point, there still was some confusion on, the testing requirements and who was going to get tested and where you could get tested. My doctor said you need to call the health department. So I spent all of Monday trying to call the health department and could not get a hold of them. The phone would either just ring and ring and ring, or like a computer would pick up and you would get dumped into an endless loop, or you would call and just get the signal that this circuit is busy. I think everyone in Clark County, Las Vegas, was trying to call the health department at that point. I did manage to get a hold of them. At that point, they had sort of gotten some guidance and told me to go to an urgent care for drive-through testing. So I went down there Tuesday afternoon. They had run out of tests when I got there, but I did meet a nice nurse who said to be back sort of at 7:30 the next morning.
And you actually texted me a picture. Can you describe what that drive-through testing, for someone who hasn't seen any photos of this, can you describe kind of what the scene is like there?
Sure. It was actually quite chaotic, and I'm lucky. So the urgent care opened at 9. The nice nurse the day before had suggested I get there at 7:30 to line up. I misheard her. I thought they were going to start testing at 7:30, so I actually arrived about 5:45 a.m. When I got there at 5:45 that morning, there were probably 15 cars in front of me. And by about 7:30 was when some of the nursing people showed up and started to queue cars up in the line. By that point, the parking lot was full. The lines were stretching all the way up. There's a big road in Las Vegas called Sahara. Traffic was backed up all the way down Sahara. That urgent care only had 250 tests that day. So by 7:30, they had to count out those first 250 cars and cut off. They started running the test at 9, so by the time they had started at 9, they had already reached capacity. That morning I did get the test done. It is quite uncomfortable. They stick a swab. It is a very long swab, and it goes all the way up. It is quite the sensation when that swab goes up. And then I left and went home and self-quarantined. I was told it would take 2 to 3 days to get the results, and so I went home and locked myself in the house.
And depending on what point you're listening to this podcast, self-quarantining is supposed to be for 14 days.
So one thing that happened during that quarantine was that when you go to these urgent care facilities, the urgent care were the folks that took the test in the parking lot, stuck the swab halfway up to my brain, and then they sent it to a lab. But you still had to fill out, it was very interesting, in paperwork anywhere you go. So they had me slide my ID and my insurance card with my hands into a Ziploc bag with ID facing up, insurance card facing down, so that the technician could then write out my information. So I got home that night, and just like if you'd go into the urgent care for, a sprained ankle, you get an email, "Thank you for visiting West Sahara Urgent Care. Click here, for your patient portal." So that weekend, when I did not get my test results and I was a little freaked out, I decided to log into that website. And a form pulls up and it says Michael Myers, and then it says the letter POS, COVID. Positive for COVID. I lost my mind for a second, but then you really read into the details, and that said reason for visit, possible COVID. Let's go ahead and do the test. But just seeing that POS COVID, I decided to, maybe in the medical coding paperwork, they need to come up with a different way of writing that out, because it really freaked me out for a second.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions is, was there ever a moment when you were, oh my goodness, I wonder if I really have it?
That really, when I read that POS Corona, I was like, oh my goodness. POS COVID. I was like, oh gosh, that was scary.
And so you're at home by yourself. What do you do? Like, how do you get your groceries? How do you get your supplies?
So at that point, when I had gotten back from North Carolina, I went to the store and sort of stocked up. At that point, I guess the pandemonium hadn't truly kicked in, so I was able to get toilet paper and sausage, and so I had stocked up a lot of supplies. I did have a dear friend of mine. He actually works in Vegas, and his business is supplying all the restaurants on the Strip with some of their higher end meats and proteins. And of course, his business is shot now. All of those businesses have been put out, and none of them are open. So he did have freezers full of product, and so it was, I don't know, like the olden days. I got a meat delivery one day. He just rang the doorbell and ran away, and I opened it and had a beautiful array of chicken and pork and sausage, some steaks and some ground beef. So I lucked out having a good friend take care of me. But it was, I was prepared to be locked in, for the full 14 days to help, if God, I wasn't feeling so terrible at that point. I was just worried that if the news said there were people that didn't have many symptoms, but were still spreading it. And I felt it was so important for me to do my part and just keep myself locked up.
And so at this point, you're essentially waiting to hear back the results of the test. How long did you have to wait to hear the results?
It took 8 days. And I tried to, obviously when I spoke to my mom on the phone, oh, I'm fine, Mom. I know I'm going to be negative. And I really did, I guess, sort of feel that I was going to be okay. But there's always doubt. The human brain can play tricks on you. And so they told me it could be 2 to 3 days. So when Friday passed, I didn't have the results. And then that weekend became longer. So it was the following Thursday that I finally got the results from the lab that I was negative.
So we're thankful to hear that, you did actually test negative. But being in Las Vegas, a city that's so well known for tourists, I'm sure that life for many folks in Las Vegas has changed with the entire Strip essentially shut down right now. But for you personally, now that you're through with the quarantine, how has this changed life for you in the way that you move about the city or even just outside of your own house?
Sure. Well, again, thank goodness I did get a negative result on that test. I am pretty much continuing almost as I was before under a almost self-quarantine. I'm only leaving the house to go to the grocery store and to the pharmacy, trips like that. Occasionally we'll just take a drive and sort of try to get out of the house for a moment. But Vegas is eerie right now, the way everything's shut down. I do actually traditionally work from home. I have a home office here, so I'm somewhat used to the telecommuting lifestyle. But I traveled a lot. I was always traveling out to various hospitals and working with folks, training them in person, going to conferences. I've had to cancel 6 upcoming conferences, 2 of which Contec we were going to be presenting at. So it has completely changed sort of how I work. Everything now is online, and trying to sort of pivot and make technology work so that we can support our customers through this pandemic.
As someone who is near to many healthcare professionals, is there any message that you'd like to give to those people who may be listening to this podcast right now?
Yeah, I'm just astounded at the way our healthcare workers have stepped up. The ironic thing is, before this really unfolded, we were all together in North Carolina at that global sales meeting, and we were talking about how astoundingly busy everyone was in 2019. and the growth that we had in helping to support these hospitals. And I would visit hospitals, and they would have a full pharmacy, and they'd be making drugs all day long for the current patients that they had. Car wrecks, heart attacks, people coming in for elective surgeries. So hospitals were very, very busy. And this pandemic has certainly added to that load. I'm sure it's frightening for these people to show up to work. They are having to sort of stretch out the amount of PPE they use. There's going to be garb shortages. It's a frightening time. And the way that they show up to work each day and keep taking care of these patients. And that's, we do certainly see the doctors and stuff on TV, but the environmental services technician that goes in there and cleans that room after a surgery, he is just as important as the doctor was, and helping to slow the spread and take care of these patients. So it's just a gratitude that I wish I had better vocabulary to fully express.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Heroes for Zero, a Contec podcast. If you aren't familiar with Contec, a quick introduction. Founded in 1988, Contec has led cleaning innovation in the most critical and demanding industries, from pharmaceutical and medical device to automotive, aerospace, hospitals, and healthcare. We are the leading manufacturer of contamination control products for critical environments worldwide. Visit www.contecinc.com for more information.